Good morning. You are listening to KSQD Santa Cruz, K-Squid 90.7 FM, streaming live at ksqd.org. I am Catherine Bell, and welcome to the Dream Journal, a weekly show where we explore the healing powers of your nighttime dreams through conversations with dream experts and with you. In the words of Carl Jung, who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens. Today's music is called Transient. The daily challenges that you experience may be moving you toward a more fulfilling life. Today we will be talking about archetypal dreamwork with Jonathan Hyland, PhD. I am your host, Catherine Bell of Experiential Dreamwork, and welcome to the Dream Journal. The Dream Journal is also a podcast, so you can look for that on all of your regular podcast platforms, and also on the KSQD website, where you can find it at ksqd.org/the-dream-journal. We have archives going back 3.5 years. So look for the Dream Journal, review it, subscribe, but most importantly, tell your friends. You know, why not talk about dreams? It's a good opportunity to say, hey, this podcast I've been listening to, and yes, I am interested in my dreams. How about you? That is my mission here, is to get people talking about dreams. So I'm going to start with my own dream work, just to dip in. I have a lot of dreams about houses, being in a house and discovering new things in houses. And I have a house where there's like a really small upstairs zone, but we go downstairs and it's much more wide and luxurious. A lot of rich furniture, and then I find this little corner. There's like a nook with a chair set up with a special reading light, and it looks like it would be just perfect for reading books. And I wonder if that dream maker is nudging me to spend a little more time reading, because, you know, this digital world we have, I don't read as much as I used to, so it just seems so cozy there downstairs in that beautiful apartment. So I might take that as a bit of a nudge. In any case, whether I do or not, I can sit there and enjoy being in that chair. So I'll just leave it at that, because, you know, I don't think dreams are nagging us, but they might have some ideas. So I will be taking call-ins during the last 30 minutes of the show, but you can also email us anytime at onair@ksqd.org. Rick Kleffel is standing by. We'll check the emails for that. I want to say hello to my guest. Jonathan Hyland, PhD, received his doctorate in depth psychology, aka analytical psychology, from Pacifica Graduate Institute. Jonathan first developed his methodology of archetypal dreamwork through his dissertation, in which he explored his experiences of anxiety as embodied experiences of the unconscious. After teaching depth psychology at the collegiate and corporate level for 6 years, and finally returning to his own Jungian analysis, Jonathan formalized his methodology as a practice of dream work that he could offer to individuals. Jonathan's website is thedreamsdoctor.com, thedreamsdoctor.com. So, Jonathan, maybe you could start by telling us about yourself. Now, I know you did a podcast not that long ago at the Dreams That Shape Us, which talks a lot about your introduction to dreams. But I want to just kind of get for you what is up for you now about how the dreams work their way into your awareness, and what is up for you right now about your journey with dreams?
Wow. Well, I was just listening to your dream. Mm-hmm. And just tracking you as you go downstairs and go into this wider space, and there's this cozy nook with books. So for me, like I feel like I'm already in a space.
Ah, yes.
You know, like I'm entering into the sort of contact lens of your image.
Perfect. And my plan is working. Just suck you in, because here we are. You know, I'm busy and I'm getting here and I'm like, well, running. But I hear the music. I'm here and I'm relaxing. I'm sharing a dream, and it just brings me deeper. And I thank you for acknowledging that, Jonathan. It seems like a small thing, but it's a big thing. Thank you.
Well, you're welcome. And it kind of grounded me, just because it's like, oh, this is real. This is the thing. This is what's happening. This is what's showing up.
Yep.
And going the descent, I'd like interesting from the descent from the small space to the big space, from the upper to the lower, and just maybe into the body. Maybe the books are in your body. Maybe the scripture, the literature, the text is the body.
Ooh. Thank you for that. That's not just literal books on the shelf, but they're also the books of my life, the books of my body, the books of my history, my psyche. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, exactly. Uh-huh. And that it's all embedded in the body, entwined, and like to luxuriate, kind of like a snakeskin. That's just sort of all moving at the same time.
Right. I love that. Now, you've talked about the body, and that you talked a lot about anxiety, and this was kind of your doorway in. And I know anxiety is really rampant today, and a lot of people, especially young folk, are feeling a lot of anxiety. And I want to pick your brain and see what you've discovered about what is valuable, what can be learned there from anxiety.
Well, it's immediate.
Yeah.
It's real.
Yeah.
It's truthful. It's powerful. And these are all things I couldn't escape from it. Mm-hmm. And it had the drop on me, and which told me that it was also intelligent. Oh. And so I always had this hunch that it was doing something for me, not just because it felt so threatening and scary, but also fascinating. I was totally engaged by it, even it cocooned me into my own world, and I really believe it created a path for me. I mean, it did. I mean, I had no because right. I was isolated, and I was starting to speak in tongues, basically, and Jung. I stumbled upon Jung in as many people do, in some bookstore, in Iraq, right. And I started to read it, and it was you talked about this personality number 1 and personality number 2.
Yeah, tell me about that. What does that mean? I've heard that before, but maybe you could explain that to me.
For me, it just suddenly everything just dilated. Everything just opened up for me. I was because I wasn't reduced to this one ego that for me it was I wasn't fitting into the cookie cutter mold that I was supposed to be. I was spilling out, and that to me I was experiencing as a problem, as threatening, as I'm messed up, I'm right. broken, I don't fit in, and so the fact that there could be another option, was just greatly just soothed me. It was immediate, balm to me.
Well, isn't that part of the thing about anxiety, is it feels like a problem, like there's something wrong and I got to fix this?
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. So
go ahead.
Tell me.
Well, for me, I created all these, it became very obsessive compulsive. So I tried to create a kind of, all these controls and superstitions came on. And it was as if I had to really thread the needle each moment. And so which was engaging, but very stressful. And so at some point it would just, it would sort of cave in on itself. And that, I think, was what I was craving, was to just be disengaged, try to feel safe or protected in some level, because to be in my body was very dangerous. It felt. So,
okay. And so how does this tie in with personality 1, personality 2?
Well, it was almost like an introduction, that first ego had to be dismembered and sort of destroyed, in a sense that this doesn't function anymore, and so then it has to go somewhere else. You have to have a relationship with something else, something other, and that, to me, the otherness is the personality number 2. Okay. There's something else there.
Okay, and so that you're saying that anxiety is what destroys kind of the kind of ego level personality?
I would say transforms it.
Okay, transforms, yeah.
Jung talks about this other figure that comes in and dwarfs the ego, and it actually ousts it from the complex. So to me, like, that's why I loved Jung, because it's just his language. I was like, oh my God, I feel like I'm getting ousted every second, and then I was definitely dwarfed, by something. I was being dwarfed by something constantly. So I just started to like submit, become sort of bend a knee, in a way.
So were you able to? So you're saying the anxiety is something that you could actually submit to, is like, and let the anxiety kind of have its way with you, or what? What do you? That's.
Well, it's that as soon as it changed, it's sort of a direction changer. Like as soon as I paid attention to it, I was open to Jung, and once I was open to Jung, I was open up to going to grad school, and then suddenly I was on this journey, and so it was like, oh, okay, you want me to go here? Why don't you just say so?
So like the anxiety had a purpose, but then the anxiety didn't go away as soon as you showed up at grad school, according to this
right.
story.
It shapeshifts, yeah.
Yeah.
And I think the really fetching thing about Jung is that the idea of the psyche being goal oriented. So it's like it's taking me from somewhere that I'm deeply entrenched in, this sort of ego, this ego position, and then sort of like, and I can't think of anything else that's probably more effective than anxiety to sort of uproot that, because it's sort of invisible and inescapable. Right, it's going to get your attention, and attention is essentially what the ego is. Right, it's where you put your attention.
Right. Well, anxiety, as you say, is kind of inescapable. It's overwhelming often. The experiences I've had of anxiety are overwhelming, and there's a intense desire to stop it, to do whatever it takes. Like you talked about the rituals and. The kind of rituals that you would use to sort of tame that. I'm really struck by this phrase you said. I'm still pondering this. Psyche is goal oriented.
Yeah,
that's interesting. Say more about that.
Well, the word he used is telos, which is the Greek word for a kind of goal or arc. I think it's arc. That there's an arc. So it's teleological. Right. So that it's going somewhere, like a plant is troping towards the sun, an acorn is following its blueprint, like our nature is going somewhere. Like nature is not exclusive to trees, it's also the human body, and the soul, and it's got a goal.
Interesting. And that which may not be the same as the goal of the conscious mind, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Then perhaps therein lies the difficulty.
Sure, the crucifixion, yeah.
Say more about that. Is that like a Christian reference? And in
well,
way,
just
the cross?
Jung talked about that, in terms of the tension of the opposites.
Yes.
And so the whole point, if you could sort of reduce depth psychology, it's all about the tension of the opposites. And if you can hold that tension, then a third thing arises. And so you have the two opposites in this case are the ego and the unconscious ego. So that there's this, you're kind of racked on that. And if you can suffer that, then a kind of third factor arises, which would be the self archetype.
Right. Oh, I love that. So I just want to let folks know this is ksqd.org, and we are streaming live at, ksqd.org. This is K-Squid 90.7 FM, still trying to get the hang of these little intro things here, these little station IDs. But I'm so glad to have Jonathan Hyland. You're listening to the Dream Journal. My name is Catherine Bell, and my guest is Dr. Jonathan Hyland, and we're talking about archetypal dreamwork. So maybe you want to say a little bit about what is archetypal dreamwork, and how does this tie in with these ideas? Plus, I say, let me add a second thing, is I have to get an actual dream in here of yours that you feel comfortable sharing to kind of, I do feel kind of grounded when I hear somebody's dreams, and I'd love to hear one of yours, and then maybe we could do that first, and then let's get into what archetypal dreamwork is.
Well, what come to mind is this dream I had recently. I think it's relevant because I'm in this sort of upper plane, and and it's sort of a desert, and there's sort of a yucca there, and it has a kind of window, or there's a space between the fronds that's covered in mesh or something, a screen. And I look through it and I see 3 coyotes, and they don't know I'm there. and I'm very surprised by this. They're tiny. They're small coyotes. They're kind of but they seem very powerful at the same time. And they're kind of moving a bit and rotating. And
rotating?
Kind of just sort of, circling
I see.
in a sense.
Yeah.
And so I'm getting close, but I'm also getting nervous. I don't want to get too close, so I want to give it away a little bit. So I kind of, move my foot and make a gravel sound. And then they catch on and they come around, because I've always had this fantasy of coming across coyotes and having a big, throwdown. And
right. Okay. So they're coming toward you now?
Yeah. They're circling around the plant. Okay. And then I suddenly realize, oh my God, not that there's much more of them, and that there's something kind of very powerful and sinister about them. That they more like they're sorcerers, and I'm way over my head. Mm-hmm. And then P.S. This is a long dream. Okay. So it's just, you might want to just stop me when you feel like we have enough meat there. But okay. So they come at me. And suddenly, I'm just suddenly backing up, and I think I have a staff with me at some point. I pick up a stick, and I'm gonna start to try to defend myself. And then I call my dog Lumi, who has passed, and she was part wolf, and she had in the real life had a couple tussles with coyotes, and came out all right. And so I was sort of calling her in. And she, I hear her suddenly kind of come to and growl, and then suddenly just jumps in. But then as she's suddenly subsumed, and she goes into the coyote den, is sort of just totally absorbed.
Absorbs her.
And so
she becomes a coyote, or she does it?
Well, no, just that she kind of is dissolved essentially. Yep. And in her wake are actually these coyote corpses. And one is actually in the form of this sort of this horizontal petroglyph. I don't know if you've seen petroglyphs, but they have these sort of ghost-like, alien-like figures. And it was one of those. It's kind of stretched out and elongated. And then I start to hear this sort of these voices, this laughing voices, and it's as if these spirits have been released, and they're kind of coming out of the den, and they're kind of as if they're gods, and they start coming out, and they're kind of raucous, and they seem kind of very, very confident and fearless, and so one starts coming towards me, and I'm backing away, and I realize it's my very good friend, my longtime friend, and he doesn't recognize me at first. As he's coming towards me, I notice that his left eye has is different. It's almost if it's been placed there, almost if it's an amulet or a jewel, and it's a little bit off center. And so, and as he comes to, he recognizes me. He starts to sort of, calm down, de-escalate, and then we're kind of walking side by side and talking, and that's basically the dream.
Wow. Okay. So what does that mean to you, and what did it do? How did you work with it? How would you explore that idea?
Well, yeah. The coyote came to me early when I went to California to study depth psychology, really to figure out my anxiety. That was really why I went to grad school, just to figure this out, what's happening to me. And so a coyote appeared to me in the Hollywood Hills, and that was life. In waking life. Okay, yeah. And it initiated this whole process, almost as a way of seeing. So when I'm looking at this plant that has this kind of mesh screen, I'm seeing through to the coyotes. It reminds me of this kind of a kind of seeing, a certain kind of perception. And then there's this, they come out, there's this disembodiment, this transformation, and something is released, and this God is coming towards me. So, the long and short of it is I actually, knew this podcast was coming up, or this show, and I was just going back into my dissertation and just reviewing things, and I was really struck at how I was really in a process. It kind of makes me emotional, but like I was very much initiated and inculcated into some kind of process that started with my anxiety and really kind of tempered me and changed the way I perceive, and it made me, porous and open to something else. And I thank the coyotes for that. And so I had kind of distilled my work recently to this idea of archetypal dream work. It's been there for a while, but it only became really clear recently, in which you really trust the dream image as its own form, as its own being. And that there's what it holds, the content of your life and what it holds, but there's the image itself that is its own living force,
rather than some interpretation of it or reducing it to symbols, that kind of thing.
And Jung always said that whenever any kind of figure or image shows itself, you give it its ethical due.
Ethical due.
Meaning that you treat it like you would treat anybody you encounter. You don't presuppose anything. You don't assign meaning. You kind of sit down, give it tea and cookies and listen.
Right. Get to know them like you would get to know another person.
And when I really trust that and do that, it's pretty amazing where the dream takes us. And so that's something I feel like I learned trial by fire through a kind of, a forge through my body, through my anxiety, and just to okay, what are you saying? What is this? Just sort of submitting to curiosity, and not pretending that I'm stronger than the image or I'm smarter than the image, but that it's stronger and smarter than me.
Right.
So
there's so many images of transformation there in that dream, and there's just the sense of evolution and growth or development. There's just like the magical things that happen with your dog and the coyote, and then ending up walking along. It feels like a complete arc. So often my dreams kind of end right at the moment of peak terror or something. But there's like this dream actually comes to a moment where you're walking along with this friend of yours. Yeah,
with my friend. And what's beautiful and you said arc, which I think is cool, just to bring it back to the telos. But the cool little amplification that I did in that dream is like, so the eye, when I was writing down the dream, I something Egyptian about the eye. And so as I'm like thinking about them, the word Horus comes up, and then it's the eye of Horus. And so I didn't even know what that was. I just knew Horus in Egypt, and I looked it up, and it refers to this god, this Egyptian god who, there's a whole story there, but he has his significance. But when I was being approached by this god, one of the first things I thought of was Apollo for some reason. And it turns out that Apollo has his origin, or one of his origins, in Egypt as the hawk-faced god, which is this Horus character who has a bird's head. And so it was just a cool example of this having a kind of archetypal dimension to it.
Right. So I want to hear more about sitting down with a dream and giving it tea and cookies. I love that. And like, if we're not going to pick up our dreams and interpret them, and what does that mean to you? Like, how do you work with your own dreams and also with the dreams that people bring to you? So I take it this is kind of the essence of archetypal dream work.
Yeah, exactly.
So maybe say a little bit more about what that is. What does that mean to sit down with a dream?
Well, I guess to bring it into reality.
What is reality, please? Waking life, perhaps? Come on, you're going to get an argument from me there.
Okay. So, like I said, it's like when when you talk about your dream,
Yeah.
and suddenly like you're presenting me with an image, of descending and going down the stairs, and so I'm already embroiled, in an image,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going down the stairs. I start to see things. I start to see the house. I start to see the rug. I start to see the books. I start to see the lamp and the couch.
Yep.
And so I start to enter into the body, if you will, of the image. In a sense, that image then starts to show itself to me.
Mm.
It starts to give me clues. It starts to do its own associations. It starts to kind of spread its tendrils. And the thing is that typically you might dismiss all of these kind of little hunches and wisps and feelings and memories, but that is the kind of the thinking of the image, its own logic that's starting to unfold and move itself. And it took a long time for me to trust that, to just, why would something that comes up in me be useful to someone else?
Mm-hmm.
But I would not so much offer what I was experiencing, but use that to ask a question, or use that to create a metaphor or some kind of bridge, and to loosen up the ego, and allow the image to start directing and curating the experience. And it became there's always a moment where in the session where I come up across that moment where I surrender to that, and I never know if it's going to work, and it always feels like a cliffhanger. It always feels like and then something switches. It just moves into a different modality, one that's not causal and not linear. And so it's, in a way, it's resuming the dream, picking up where the dream left off, or going down one of the other rabbit holes that are present in the dream. I don't know if you've ever had the experience of revisiting a dream and remembering a part that you forgot, or you didn't realize you remembered, or there's these.
Absolutely.
That's the kind of nature of the dream.
Uh-huh. Well, I've had the recent experience of a particular dream that has been very important to me around my relationship, and I quote this dream often and have been writing about it, and I cannot find it in my journal. Does this dream mean the dream doesn't exist and I made it up? I mean, it's the weirdest thing.
Wow.
But this whole kind of defines the archetype of my relationship, and so I'm just going to go with it. So, Jonathan, we need to take a short break. I want to say this is K-Squid 90.7 FM, streaming live at ksqd.org, and you are listening to The Dream Journal. My guest today is Dr. Jonathan Hyland, and I am Catherine Bell, and the phones are now open. Tony Russomano is here to take your call if you'd like to call in with a dream or a question. The phone number to call is 831-900. 5773, or you can send an email to onair@ksqd.org. That phone number again is 831-900-5773. We'll be right back talking about archetypal dream work.
I'm Rick Cleffel. You are listening to The Dream Journal on KSQD Santa Cruz, ksqd.org. Every Sunday evening from 9 to 10 p.m., you can tune in to Cephalatron. It's 1 hour of electronic listening music, and I am the curator. So if you enjoy the music you hear on the show, or are simply looking for a place to get the time to get into your mind and out of your head, it's Cephalatron. Electronic listening music, Sunday, 9 to 10.
All right, this is The Dream Journal. My name is Catherine Bell. My guest today is Dr. Jonathan Hyland. So Jonathan, I wanted to bring in the element of waking life. So what What do you mean about archetypal experiences in waking life? Like, how does that? What does that mean?
It means anxiety for me,
I see.
that because it's a presence, and it is something kind of that has its own intelligence that is other than you. It's not your personality, but it's something happening to your personality. And I think, if you think about it, there's many other versions of that.
Like, what's some other examples?
Well, I mean, depression for one, lack of purpose, even boredom or blocks, or even joy, even ecstasy, even that's why it's interesting with psychedelia, and that all of that needs integration. Anxiety just as much as ecstasy, and I think there's just part of the human experience is there's so much that is, I think, unspoken and not talked about, that is so constant. If you think about, recently I did a fast in the woods with this sort of men's group, and it was probably one of the most powerful experiences of my life. From the moment the sun set, just being in one spot in the woods for 4 days with no food, I was sort of greatly reminded of the persistence and presence of life in all of its facets, just in the minutia of it, and just what's happening to the individual in every moment. And it's sort of breathtaking. But how much of that is silenced and dampened by our agendas, and yet they creep in, because life wants something.
Could that be a way of like kind of creating your own archetypal experience? Like to have this kind of moment out of time, these 4 days in the forest? I mean, it's like...
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. Because it's unique to each individual, whatever that's going to be.
Well, you can pick the same circumstances and say sit in the forest for 4 days, and each person is going to have a very different experience.
So radically different.
Yeah. Okay. So it's interesting. I'm thinking about these archetypal forces in waking life, and how is this? And for some reason my eyes keep going toward this note about psyche being goal oriented, and that yet these forces that you describe, in some ways they seem goal-less. Like depression and anxiety, they're kind of an absence of goal, like a lack of meaning. I mean, have you thought about that? I kind of brought that together. I'm just kind of mulling.
But they get your attention, though.
Yes, they do.
They make the ego feel meaningless, right, and sort of like futile. And they're amazing at sort of like surrounding, and ambushing the ego and prompting it to its transformation. So I think that you have to feel the emptiness of the individual before it can be, released. Otherwise there's a fantasy that I'm going to be, whatever. So I think that the ego structure has to be kind of really tested and vexed and challenged to see its limitation, to bring it to come to the limit. And there's nothing like depression or despair or anxiety to do that.
Well, they can be pivotal points in people's lives, that's for sure.
Yeah.
And that's something that we can often use as a pivot, something needs to change.
Yeah, it's certainly difficult in this sort of modern age, with everything that we can try to anesthetize it with, so that it kind of prolongs the desert, or prolongs the pathology, or whatever you want to call it, the suffering.
So would you say this is part of the process of individuation, where we're moving toward something?
Yeah. Completely. Yeah,
okay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Maybe you could say a little more about that. Like what is individuation, and how do our dreams play a role there? And our waking life experiences too, really.
Well, so, in short, I think individuation, the way I think Jung understood it or talks about it, is just kind of becoming who you really are, and realizing that. And so it's a lifelong process. For me, I was living in Manhattan, I was temping, I was trying to act, and I just felt like I was surrounded by concrete, that I was tied to concrete. concrete shoes, or just, and it was as if the anxiety, kind of like a vine, kind of in the way that only nature can break up concrete, the way tree roots can sort of break the sidewalk.
Absolutely, yeah.
It was the only thing that could really do that for me, that could destroy what my current reality was, and show me that there was something else, that there was something deeper.
That image of the tree breaking the concrete is really harking back to what you said before about letting the dream spread its tentacles. Like, is there a way that dreams also kind of break up the concrete of our lives whether we let them or not? The dreams are doing that. That's what I believe. But I think we can enhance that by, like you said, sitting them down for tea and cookies, by inviting the dreams into the waking world.
Absolutely. And for me, writing my dreams down is a huge practice. And so it becomes a kind of meditation in which I just sort of let them write themselves out. And that for me is a really, really grounding and sort of nutritional, religious experience for me, because like I get to sort of, it's like my own Eucharist, where I can drink from the source, and that quenches something, it quenches something. And I think that's what was so appealing to me ultimately about dreams, because I needed a language that was more sophisticated than what I was encountering in my own head, in my social life, in my, that was more complex, that was timeless, that was incandescent, was surreal, was, and to know that existed for me somehow, that was actually a way of being, a way of existing. And and the more you spend time with your dreams, and talk about them and share them, and they slowly they kind of propagate within your consciousness, and like the vine, it makes me think of Dionysus, who's this, when in the Greek you just see these vines and these grapes and this temple. It's like it becomes your own temple. I think that's what really individuation, the goal of individuation, is that you find your own temple, your own Godhead. Like, because the psyche, for Jung, was really also a spiritual instinct. It was a religious instinct, that it was trying to, it was some kind of divinity trying to realize itself. And so that I love the idea of your own temple, your own religion that
Definitely.
Is for you, that sort of redeems you, is your redemptive path, And
the dreams are very personal. They are precisely for the dreamer. There is something incredibly precise about the dreaming. I just want to let folks know that this is K-Squid 90.7 FM in the Dream Journal. You're welcome to call in. The number is 831-900-5773, or you can send an email to onair@ksqd.org. And Jonathan, I wanted to talk about, this is Dr. Jonathan Hyland. I wanted to talk about the idea that the dream isn't a narrative, it's a dialogue. And some of the things that you sent to me, and I'm wondering, what do you mean by that, and how do we be good conversationalists with our dreams?
Yeah, so I think the narrative is really an ego structure or an ego projection of just sort of like a linear construct put on something to make order, so that there's a beginning, middle, and end. And I think that I like to think that the dream, actually, the unconscious is a suspended. It's a suspension of psychic energy.
A suspension? What do you mean suspension? Like a ceasing of a psychic?
Like a frozen.
Oh, like it's hanging there.
Like a snapshot of psychic energy.
Okay, I see. Okay.
Of the libido, which has its own goal, which has its own nature, which wants to do things, and so and I like to call that a sort of meta narrative. In that it's not confined by linearity or causality. It's sort of more its own art, its own creation, its own expression. So the more that you start to familiarize yourself with your images, with the textures and the atmosphere and the style and the details, and just to be sort of immersed in it, it starts to tell its story. But its story requires how it unfolds in your imagination, how it folds in your perception, and then it's a kind of call and response, this back and forth. So I will respond to something in the dream, it will make me think of something, and then that allows me to re-enter the image at a different point, at which point I'm then respond to that and have an experience and then return back to the image. Meanwhile, the image is holding that whole it's the vessel, it's the container of that whole process, and it in some ways anticipates what's happening to you.
What do you mean? Say more about that.
Okay, so one example is going back to that Apollo. Like I thought, why am I thinking about Apollo? And then it goes, what is Apollo? He's the archer, right? That's the arc, right? That's the telos, right? So there's it's sort of the dream anticipated that I would look up Apollo, that I would think about Apollo, and that I would then have a process with Apollo and look up, the Horus eye and find Apollo hiding in that amplification and come back to this eye that's the left eye, and that there was a sort of arc to that, a trajectory. There was a kind of plan there that couldn't be understood in a linear way, because who knew that I would choose to go that route with that impulse.
Right. Oh, interesting. I just have a little synchronicity that I have an eye is one of the logos of experiential Dreamwork that I use, and I think of it as like the inner eye looking within, but the eye is such a powerful symbol. And here the dream was anticipating your discovery.
Yeah, and to me, which was significant about that eye, that jewel, that amulet, was that it was for me an image of archetypal dreamwork. The image is its own eye, so that you take up the image and you start to see what it sees. And so for me, that was the confirmation or validation of this idea of this archetypal dreamwork, that I was being kind of approved, by the psyche. They were validated. And the left eye, is the left side of the body, the feminine, is often connected with the unconscious. So it's kind of like putting on this eye, each dream image is an eye. And you could think about that as being the unconscious I, or the unconscious ego that you put on.
So it's like a particular view. Like I'm thinking of my dream at the top of the hour was like going down to the second level, and I'm like seeing things from a deeper level. Like I have a different view of things.
Right, and that is the text. That is the book, and just kind of, it's interesting. From up in the head, it's this narrow space, but as you go down, it widens. Yeah, right. And is cozy.
Well, it's certainly my experience having a pretty rich inner world, and it's definitely developed over the years as I've worked with my dreams, that there's even more. In fact, that's a recurring theme for me of a house and then going into the basement of the house. That this is like quite a theme for me. And so I'm still wanting to get to where you think of this as a dialogue.
Well, what I mean by dialogue is that, on two levels. One is that dream, when I put that eye on, when I hold that image in my mind's eye and I start to see with it, I start to have an experience. Thoughts come to me, feelings come to me, associations come to me, and I hold that and sort of in parallel with the dream.
Oh, so this is like the tension of the opposites, that by holding that tension, that's kind of the conversation, that's part of the dialogue?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yes. Okay. All right.
And ultimately, that in my sessions with clients, that so I'm given this jewel, this sort of necklace of images, in each dream, and I just basically hold that image up as a prism in a way, and start to have a dialogue with the client, about what is this? What do you see? Tell me more about this, and it's then you're seeing with the sort of the prism of that unconscious eye,
right,
or that sort of archetypal sort of accuracy. because there's only like, if I ask a question from that image, it's going to a very specific spot, in your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like holding a magnifying to the sun,
Well, I have a teacher who used to say that this process that we're talking about here is like walking into the dark, holding up the lantern of the dream, and that the dream is the light that shines into the darkness and kind of shows us where to go, I guess. Shows us what's there in the darkness, things we didn't know.
Yeah. I mean, for me, the way I understand it and the way it feels most present is that when I'm writing a dream down, it's as if you're like in a glass bottom boat, and suddenly as I'm writing, I'm in the boat, I'm looking in my mind's eye internally through this glass that the dream has given me, and it's just what fish swim by, and
what a great image. There's been so many beautiful images today, Jonathan. Yes, being the glass bottom boat.
Well, this funny thing is, another dream I had last night is I'm on a ferry boat, and these sea lions and seals start jumping up onto the back of the boat and sort of swim and shooting through between my legs. And there were people on the shore that were telling me that they're greeting me. They're in a sense saluting me.
Uh-huh.
And so I thought of that just as I was talking about the glass bottom.
Like all these images that you've been sharing today feel like those seals leaping up out of the water onto the boat of the radio show.
Yeah.
Look, show me, say me, show me.
And then we give that its proper due. We say maybe that's not just me making an association. Maybe that's not just whimsy or fantasy, but that's actually happening. Like it happened in both of our minds,
Totally. I love that. And so tea and cookies for you, seals. There you go.
That's right.
So Jonathan Hyland, how can folks get in touch with you? What we have the dreamsdoctor.com. And what are you doing now? Like what are you most excited about that you're working on and that you're doing in your life?
At this moment it's my practice, just because I really have just sort of distilled it down to exactly what we're talking about, and it seems to be. I think the magnifying glass to the sun is a really good metaphor and image, because it sort of harnesses that solar power or lunar power. Really, I mean, it's if we're talking about the dreams, and it really like burns. It targets what you're struggling with, and it kind of burns it away. By allowing you to approach it from all these different angles and see where the fear is hiding or what you're avoiding.
So you have to be willing to let go of those things, I guess, if you're going to put a magnifying glass to the sun. That's a little scary.
Yeah, well, I think you have to at least be willing to talk about it,
Right.
and then allow the image to guide your thoughts about it, and what you're like, oh my God, I don't know why I remember this,
right.
But that happens a lot, where you're engaging the image, and suddenly like, I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but
trust that.
And it opens up this pathway that does something very specific.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Jonathan. We just have like 30 seconds for any final thoughts for our listeners that you'd like to share.
I would say that my website I made it years ago, so it's pretty antiquated, and I would say that you can find me there, but you can also just find me on Instagram as the Dreams Doctor, and I post a lot there. I kind of update that. So the one thing I would just say is that when you write down your dream, just trust what comes to you, and no matter what it is, and include it in the narrative of the dream and the story. That the dream isn't complete until you have experienced it again.
Thank you, Dr. Jonathan Hyland. It has been a pleasure. Well, take care and hope to see you. Maybe you can get to the IASD next year. We'll be up in Ashland.
That would be awesome. I would love to join that.
Good luck with your practice. Yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, take care.
Take care. Bye.
Bye now. So next week we will be talking to Tuere Kenyisa about creating spaces of pleasure for queer and Black people, including dream spaces. So you can tune in and listen to the live broadcast Saturday at 10, or catch the podcast replay, which will be released, as always, on the Monday following the show. I am Catherine Bell. This has been the Dream Journal. Thanks for listening. You can find out about my own dream coaching practice at experientialdreamwork.com. Email me at catherine@ksquid.org. That's KATHERINE@ksqd.org. Please contact me so we can talk about dreams, and I can let you know about my upcoming dream offerings. So thanks to folks who've been leaving reviews on Apple Podcasts. I'd love to get a few more there. So come on over and give me some stars and some reviews. I'd like to thank my Rick Kleffel, who's the engineer and music creator for the show. You can find all of the ambient music created for the show at pendemiad.com. Thank you to Tony Russamano for the answering phones, Eva Milady for audio editing. And the outro music you're listening to right now is called Everything by Mood Science. Thank you to the donors who support this station. We couldn't be here if you weren't there. So go ahead to ksqd.org, and when you donate, be sure to tell them you are a Dream Journal listener. I am Catherine Bell, and you are listening to KSQD Santa Cruz.
But much more.